Welcome to the deep dive, and a big hello to everyone joining us through TechDaily.ai. Today, we're really getting into something significant. A major U.S. federal judge's ruling that touches Google's Chrome browser and its Android operating system. And believe me, this isn't just another piece of tech news. This decision, it could send ripples, really big ones, through the market, impacting Google, obviously, but also how you interact with tech day to day. So our goal here, like always, is to cut through the complexity, the legal speak, all that noise, and give you the clear, essential takeaways. We want you to finish this deep dive feeling informed, but not, completely overwhelmed. Before we jump in, I just want to mention that this deep dive is proudly sponsored by Stonefly. They're your trusted solution provider and advisor for enterprise storage, AI servers, and really comprehensive cloud security solutions. You can learn more over at stonefly.com.
Great to be here. And I have to agree, the importance of this ruling, well, it's hard to overstate. In the whole landscape of tech antitrust battles we're seeing, this isn't just a Google issue. It's setting precedents. Big ones.
Definitely. Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Where did this all start? For anyone needing a quick catch-up, this specific lawsuit goes back to 2020. That's when the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, filed suit. They accused Google of basically unlawful monopolistic practices, specifically in general search and search advertising, big markets. And importantly, this latest ruling we're discussing today, it comes after an earlier decision back in August 2024. In that one, a U.S. district court already found Google violated Section 2 of the Sherman Act, the main U.S. law against monopolies. So Google was already found to be a monopolist in this area.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And that earlier finding is key because it really explains why the DOJ went in so aggressively with their proposed remedies. They weren't just asking for small changes or, a fine. They were pushing for the most drastic options. We're talking about forcing Google to sell off, divest its Chrome browser. And the Android operating system, too. Just think about that. The government wanting to break apart core pieces of, one of the biggest tech companies on the planet. The stakes were incredibly high.
Wow. Okay, so that brings us to this week's news, September 2nd, 2025. And this is where it gets, really interesting. Judge Amit Mehta delivered the ruling, and the big headline is, Google gets to keep Chrome, and it won't have to sell off Android. That must have been a huge sigh of relief inside Google, keeping those core assets. But given that earlier monopoly finding, what was the judge's logic here? How did he square that circle?
Well, the judge essentially said the DOJ, the plaintiffs, they overreached. That's the term he used. Overreached in demanding divestiture. He specifically stated that Google didn't use Chrome or Android to carry out any illegal restraints. So it's a fine point. Yes, they have a monopoly. But according to the judge, they didn't use these specific assets, Chrome and Android, illegally in a way that justifies breaking them up.
Interesting distinction. So monopoly, yes, but the tools themselves weren't wielded illegally to warrant divestiture. What can Google still do then?
Right. And this is crucial. The ruling explicitly allows Google to keep doing something fundamental to its business, paying distribution partners. Paying companies to preload Google services, Chrome, Google Search onto devices. That continues.
Okay, like the big one everyone talks about.
Exactly. The prime example is Apple. Google pays Apple literally billions of dollars per year just for making Google the default search engine on iPhones and other Apple devices. That practice, it's allowed to continue under this ruling. It's a core part of how Google maintains its search dominance, and that remains intact.
Okay, so that's a massive win for Google. They keep the assets, they keep making these huge payments to ensure defaults. But it wasn't a total victory, right? The judge did impose some restrictions. Seems like he felt something needed to change.
Yes, absolutely. It wasn't a free pass. There are important limitations. Firstly, Google is now barred from entering into exclusive contracts that block competitors from accessing the search market.
Okay, so trying to stop them from locking potential rivals out completely. That sounds like an attempt to foster some competition.
Precisely. The idea is to make sure other search engines have at least a theoretical path to users, even if Google is paying to the default spot.
And wasn't there something about data sharing too? That sounds significant.
Yes, that's the other major piece. Google will be required to make certain data available to competitors, specifically some search index data and user interaction data.
The idea being, if competitors get some of Google's data insights, they could maybe improve their own search results and compete better.
That's the theory. But this is where the details, the nuance, really matter.
Okay, what's the catch?
Well, what's fascinating is what isn't included. The ruling explicitly says Google does not have to share ads data.
So the search data, but not the advertising data, which is where Google makes most of its money.
Exactly. And perhaps just as importantly, any data sharing that does happen must be on ordinary commercial terms. Basically, terms consistent with how Google already licenses data through its syndication services.
Meaning they can charge competitors for this data.
It implies that, yes, ordinary commercial terms suggest it won't be free. So competitors might get access, but potentially at a cost that could limit how much it truly helps them compete. And without the ads data, you could argue it significantly limits the potential for competitors to challenge Google's core business model. It's access, but maybe not the kind of access that truly levels the playing field.
So maybe not the silver bullet for competition some might have hoped for. Interesting. Let's shift to the market reaction, because that was pretty immediate and quite strong, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The markets reacted very positively for Google.
Yeah, I saw Alphabet, Google's parent company, their shares jumped significantly. What was it, like 6% to 8% in after-hours trading right after the news broke?
That's right. A clear signal that investors felt Google had dodged the worst-case scenario, that its fundamental structure was safe.
And it wasn't just Google, right? Apple saw a bump, too.
Yes, Apple shares rose about 4%, which makes perfect sense.
Because those multi-billion-dollar payments from Google for default search status, they continue. So good news for Apple's bottom line, too.
It really highlights how interconnected these big tech ecosystems are. One ruling impacts several major players.
Okay, so market relief. But this legal fight isn't necessarily over, is it?
Not by a long shot. Google has already indicated they plan to appeal the decision.
Which means
the implementation of these remedies, the ban on exclusive contracts, the data sharing will likely be delayed. Appeals take time.
So the status quo might remain for a while longer, even with this ruling on the books.
It's very possible. This ruling is significant, yes, but it's likely just one stage in a much longer legal process. Think marathon, not sprint.
And zooming out even further, how does this fit into the broader picture of antitrust efforts against big tech in the U.S.?
Well, it's definitely part of that larger trend. There's been this wider effort, as it's often called, by regulators and authorities to scrutinize and, well, attempt to rein in the power of major tech companies. This effort has been ongoing for years now, really gaining steam back in the first term of former President Trump and continuing since. It crosses political lines to some extent.
So this case is a major test within that ongoing effort.
A huge test. It explores the limits of antitrust law in the digital age, especially when it comes to remedies. Can you, or should you, break up a company versus imposing behavioral rules?
Which really raises a big question, doesn't it? What signal does this particular judgment send? You know, the judge allowed Google to keep its key assets, Chrome and Android, but did impose these behavioral changes, like the contract bans and data sharing. Does this set a kind of template for future cases against other tech giants? Maybe leaning towards less drastic remedies than breakups, but still trying to curb specific behaviors? Or will it be case by case?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, really. It could be seen as setting a precedent for more nuanced remedies, acknowledging dominance, but focusing interventions on specific conduct rather than structural separation. But, different judges, different circuits, different facts in other cases. It's entirely possible we'll see divergent approaches. It's definitely something everyone in the tech legal world will be watching very closely.
Absolutely. Okay, let's bring this down to the ground level. So what does this all mean for you, listening right now, using your phone or computer? Well, the immediate takeaway is probably, don't expect big, sudden changes to how you use Chrome or Android. Google's main services, they're staying integrated. Google Search will likely still be the default you see in those places. Chrome isn't going anywhere. The user experience you're used to, it's likely to remain largely the same in the short term.
That seems right. The most dramatic potential changes, like needing a separate company's browser on Android, were avoided.
But what about the longer term? These restrictions, the ban on exclusive deals, the data sharing, they're intended to do something, right?
Theoretically, yes. The goal is to inject more competition into the market.
So could that eventually mean more choices for you? Maybe better search alternatives popping up down the line because they have a slightly better chance to compete?
That's the hope from a competition standpoint. If other search providers can gain even a small foothold, access some data, aren't totally locked out by exclusive deals, maybe they can innovate. It could lead to, maybe new features or different approaches to search that might appeal to you. More competition usually benefits consumers in the end.
So perhaps subtle shifts over time rather than an earthquake.
I think that's a fair assessment. And look, while this ruling didn't go as far as the DOJ wanted with divestiture, it's still a significant intervention. It's a signal that these companies aren't completely untouchable. It is a step toward addressing monopolistic practices, even if it's a more cautious step. But its real-world effectiveness, that really hinges on how these rules are actually implemented and enforced. And according to how the appeal process plays out, it's a story that's still unfolding.
A very complex picture indeed. All right, let's try and wrap this up with the key points. So the bottom line, Google gets to keep Chrome and Android. That's huge. But they face new rules, no more certain types of exclusive contracts, and they have to share some search data, though not the crucial ads data, and potentially at a cost. The immediate market reaction was positive for Google and also for Apple, thanks to those continued partnership payments.
And the legal battle isn't over, with appeals expected.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to ponder as you go about your day. Is our current legal system really set up to deal effectively and, maybe more importantly, quickly with these incredibly fast-moving digital monopolies? Or are rulings like this just moves in a very long, very complex game of legal chess between regulators and big tech? Something to think about. That brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thank you so much for tuning in. And before we sign off, a quick reminder from our sponsor, Stonefly. They're offering a 100 TB immutable and air-gapped SSO NAS that's secure single sign-on network-attached storage for just $8,995. Really an incredible deal for robust, secure storage. Check them out at stonefly.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.